Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to this panel on BAME, Wellbeing and Mental Health. I'm Xin Wang from Eire Dialogue. And a brief about Eire Dialogue. It was established in Dublin in 2010. And it is a sister charity of Dialogue Society. Our aim is to advance social cohesion by connecting communities. We're focused on a whole range of social issues. So today, we're going to focus on BAME, wellbeing, and mental health. According to studies and the impact of COVID-19 in Ireland, people are at greater risk of mental health issues, such as isolation, depression, and anxiety. But among Ireland population, BAME and women could be more mentally vulnerable facing this pandemic. And BAME means people from Black, Asian, and ethnic minorities. However, they haven't gained much attention from the media, from the report, from the society. So our panel today is to promote the awareness of BAME women and mental health and to provide some advice and knowledge for them to improve mental health. And in addition, this panel is one of Eire Dialogue Women Empowerment events. So if you want to hear more from us, welcome to subscribe to our channel and be free to ask questions or make comments through the YouTube live chat, and we will pick up questions and we'll answer that. Thank you so much. And we are very honored today to have like 5 friends with us who have years of experience in mental health. They will provide advice and knowledge about how to go through this difficult time and improve our mental health. And the running order today, we will ask them questions, and it's about 10 minutes for each speaker. Then each speaker will ask each other questions or make a comment based on what we've talked about today. And then we have Q&A section. That means that you could ask a question and we will answer that. Okay, so first, let's get started. First, welcome Clara Hand. Hi, Clara Hand. She is a mental health advocate and intern mental health nurse. She's also the SpunOut Dublin Action panelist. So welcome her to provide some experience and knowledge about how to improve mental health in this difficult time, especially for women. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Clara. I'm 23 and I'm an intern mental health nurse. I'm a mental health advocate and I have previously and still work alongside some fantastic organisations such as SpunOut and BodyWise. I'm going to give you a quick background about myself before I dip into BAME women and mental health. Some of the topics that I am going to briefly cover, and again, very brief because this is such an in-depth area. I think we'd all be here all night if we were able to go in depth. If anything that I'm talking about you're finding difficult, absolutely feel free to log off and back on again. Seek support if you need. You can text the crisis text line on 50808. So my name is Clara and I'm an intern mental health nurse. I've been working in mental health for the past 4 years now. God, it doesn't feel like that long till I say it out loud. I suppose what sparked my interest in mental health and working in mental health is that I didn't actually know an awful lot about it until it affected me personally. When I was 15, I had an eating disorder and I was admitted to a child and adolescent mental health inpatient unit for 3 months, which at the time, I didn't know these facilities existed in Ireland. I had a lot of inner stigma. And it wasn't until I was in hospital and I received fantastic care that I realized, you know, there's actually nothing wrong with me. I was just going through a really hard time. And now with some support, like, not a bother. You know, everyone, we are all capable of recovery, and recovery, I personally believe, is very much an ongoing journey and not a destination. So it's something that I still work at, some days more than other, but overall pretty good. So that was not your typical experience as a 15-year-old. That really opened my mind to, what could have helped me, like what could have prevented me becoming this unwell and having to have this admission. And I remember thinking, if people actually spoke about these issues, because I didn't know that these issues existed. I didn't know that, like, anyone could have an eating disorder. I thought it was very much a Hollywood issue. And for me to be told I had one just seemed bizarre. And I really wish that people had spoke more about these topics. So I thought, God, I'd really like to do that. And that's just kind of what I've been doing since. I'm very lucky that I get to do it as a profession and promote mental health awareness and well-being. So unfortunately, then 3 months after I got out of hospital, I was a victim of sexual violence. So that's a cause very close to my heart and something that I'm very interested in now as a professional. On the other side, as I can absolutely testify that the impact it had on my mental health was horrific. To be honest, I ended up leaving school, and I went to Youth Reach then, got myself back on track, got the help and support I needed, got into a pre-nursing PLC, and then my PLC got me into my degree, and haven't looked back since. So I'm just going to talk a little bit now about marginalised women, such as women from the LGBT plus community, asylum seekers, homeless women, women with disabilities, and traveller and Roma women, because these groups of women are disproportionately impacted by poor mental health. So an example of this, how I can best explain and describe how they are affected negatively, is, say if we have a woman who is a lone parent, for example. She may be struggling with her mental health, but for her to get to her mental health supports, her mental health services, she may not have childcare. She may not have the money or resources to get there. She may not even know that these services exist because she's so busy doing everything herself for her children. If we have a homeless woman, for example, and I don't think a lot of people are actually aware of this, homeless people aren't necessarily able to access mental health services, particularly community services. And I was shocked at this. I actually learned this while on a mental health clinical placement, particularly for the likes of community mental health services. How they relay information, such as appointment dates and times, is through the post. So if you don't have an address, how do you get these appointments? So that's something to be really, really mindful of, is that, a lot of the time, homeless people aren't actually able to access mental health services. And I personally believe that this is something which absolutely needs to be looked at and addressed. Why it hasn't already, I don't know, but that's another issue for another day. And then, say for an example, a member of the traveling community or the Roma community, or maybe someone who is a migrant, this woman may have limited access and knowledge to mental health services, particularly if someone has come from abroad. They may not be aware of the services, the mental health services that we have here in Ireland, or the fact that you can access them for free, or even, there's still a lot of stigma. We're doing better in Ireland, but we certainly still have a lot of stigma within Ireland, and in other cultures as well. Mental health can often be seen still as a very taboo subject, and it doesn't really exist. So it's really important that we help educate everyone on mental health, what mental health is, and what supports are out there, and that we make this information as easy as possible to understand and access, because some of these women may not have literacy skills, such as being able to read or write. So it's really important that we're able to access everyone, and that everyone understands that there is help out there for them, and that they deserve this help. And overall, there's a lot of pressure on women. Like, even myself, for example, I am a thin white woman. and I don't feel represented by magazines or anything. So I like, can you imagine how anyone else who was even slightly different from that image would feel? And I think that's something that really needs to be addressed within our society, is representation. You know, everyone deserves to have someone that they feel that they can relate to and look up to when they're growing up. And I really think that this is something that the media really needs to look at and continue to look at going forward, you know, is representing everyone of all backgrounds, ages, sizes, ethnicities, you know. And it's a real shame that we're still preaching this in this day and age. And hopefully things will change, because representation does matter. In 2016, a study carried out by Healthy Ireland, I believe it was, found that women in Ireland aged 15 to 24 years were the group with the highest levels of negative mental health. And it's really such influential ages. Like, you know, if we all think back to when we were a teenager, when we were, you know, 15, 16, 17, so on, all you really want to do is fit in, you know. It's a lot of pressure. And I think how we can help address that and look at that as a society is, you know, our language matters so much. And I'm not going to touch too much into this, because I know this is going to be explained much better later on. But, you know, like we hear all the time, like people being complimented on their weight loss, but we don't really know what we're complimenting. You know, when I was in the absolute pits of anorexia, so unwell, people would tell me how great I looked, asked what my workout regime was, tell me how amazing I looked, how great my figure was. And it was really hard, because I felt awful. I felt like crap. And yet everyone was like, you look amazing. And I didn't feel it. And I was so unwell. Like I was not living a happy life. And I would just really always advise steering clear of making any comments or compliments about body weight and size, whether you mean it as a compliment or not. You know, we're so much more than just how we physically are. Our bodies and weight are going to change. They're going to fluctuate over the years. They're meant to, you know. I'm certainly not the same size I was when I was age 16. And to be honest, if I was, that wouldn't really be normal, because, you know, I'm a woman now. I'm in my 20s. There's so much more to us just than the outside, you know. Tell people why you like them, you know. Are they funny? Do they make you feel better? Do they make you feel comfortable? These are all really, really nice compliments to receive. And I do want to touch on the area of sexual violence in Ireland. Well, it's a worldwide issue, but we're talking about Ireland here. And sexual violence is something that does not discriminate. It can affect anyone of any gender, any age, any background. But we do know that the rates of sexual violence against women are higher than that of any other gender. 1 in 4 women in Ireland have experienced physical and or sexual violence since the age of 15. I am one of these women, and working in mental health, I see it an awful lot, to the point where it's nearly normalized sometimes, which is very sad, because it's not a normal experience. And whether they're your partner or a stranger or whoever, your voice matters and your consent matters, and consent absolutely is always needs to be taken into consideration, whether it's someone you've met for the first time or whether it's someone you've been married to for 25 years. Your voice and your consent do matter. And then just briefly, the area of sex workers. So in mental health, we would consider sex workers a minority group. And it's really important that, you know, we're aware of sex workers and their presence, and, you know, we speak and treat to them in the way that they deserve.
So it's really a very sad experience, like for you to like share your stories. And According to your experience, I think the society could offer more access to people, especially BAME women from different groups, to offer more help.
Absolutely, yeah. It's really like, you know, there's work that we can do as a society from the ground level, but then it's really important that like this work is also being done in organizational and institution levels, like, you know, from the higher ups that are implementing these policies. Like, just for example, like the Sexual Offences Act 2017 made the purchasing of sex a criminal offence. Since then, the rate of violent crime against sex workers has gone up 92%. This act was opposed by the likes of organisations who are actually out there in the field working with sex workers in Ireland, caring for sex workers in Ireland.
It's kind of like shocking. Yeah,
it's really important that we listen to the people who are directly affected, the organisations who are directly involved.
Yeah.
You know, we need to be listening to them, and we've seen that during COVID, you know, particularly with sex workers, they have been massively affected.
Yeah, and about like other areas, as we're talking about like people from the ethnic minorities from different disciplines. So how about like we invite Blessing to talk about her own story. Yeah. So I know like Blessing has also like been through a lot, and she is ready to talk about her stories and how she has overcome such like some sad experience and how she has overcome them. And she also is a mental health advocate, and she is award-winning amateur writer in 2019. She also works with Sea Change and SpunOut. So now let's welcome Blessing Dada.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on. Really excited to talk about just having to speak with you guys tonight on this topic. So I think I'll just talk a little bit about myself and why I am passionate about mental health. So my name is Blessing. I am 21 years old, and I am currently a youth and community development student and worker. And I am one of my passions when it comes to advocating would be chronic illness and mental health, but mental health mainly more just because of the experience of struggling with my mental health as a Black woman in Ireland. So basically, the way mental health is perceived in ethnic minority groups in Ireland, especially from my experiences as an Irish Nigerian, it's kind of the way mental health, in terms of the way we speak about it, with language, it is very different in Ireland compared to kids of ethnic minority backgrounds, especially there's the aspect of cultural stigma to think about. So growing up, basically, I've always struggled with my mental health on and off, just because there was a lot of issues that were kind of happening in my life back then and kind of continuing at the moment. But I didn't really allow that to sit with me until I was about like 12 or 14. So like before then, you know, I was going through issues with at home and being bullied in school, and that type of stuff. And, you know, being resilient, it was kind of, back then, it was just kind of, I guess, just bottling up my issues and just having to, you know, go with the flow. Because I'm also the eldest of 4 kids in my family. So especially in ethnic minority cultures, being the oldest kid in your family is like really important to like set the example for your siblings and that type of stuff. And just the pressure of, you know, your parents relying on you to be that example for your kids, for your siblings. So that's why I kind of, you know, bottled it down until I was about 12 and 14. And that's when the issues kind of started to, I guess, just spill out. And I remembered I tried to have this conversation with my mom. I didn't really know how to go about it, just because it wasn't talked about as much then as it is right now. And the first time I opened up to her was also the last time I opened up to her. Just basically, mental health is seen as, you know, a Western society issue, that, you know, Black people, especially Black women, don't struggle with their mental health issue, with their mental health. Even when I was trying to have the conversation, I could be speaking for like 5 minutes, and the only thing that would stick in their head was just the word mental. Like, they wouldn't understand that, you know, everyone has mental health. Not everyone would struggle with their mental health, but like everyone has like mental health, just as everyone has physical health. So yeah, that was the last time I opened up about that, and I basically just had to, you know, navigate my life, just trying to manage with my mental health, and it's just has worsened over time, just because you know, I tried to reach out. I also tried to reach out in school. They didn't really know how to go about it, just because, you know, you're dealing with another person's culture, and, you know, you want to be cautious of how to approach it and that type of stuff. So it didn't really go as well. And I only found out this year, actually in March, that I actually was referred to mental health services 6 times, and my mom turns them all down. It was just seen as, I think for her, it was just seen as like, you know, failing as a parent, which is not true at all, you know. But especially when being Black, it's seen as, you know, going through the efforts of, you know, leaving your home life back in Africa, in Nigeria, and, you know, bringing your kids to Ireland to give them a better life, and then to see your child struggling with mental health. It's kind of like, you know, she would kind of see it as like, you know, she failed, or that, you know, I shouldn't be struggling, that, you know, our ancestors went through wars and poverty, which is still happening right now, and that there's nothing for me to struggle. I have a roof over my head, clothes on my back, going to school, going to college as well, and no wars in Ireland, obviously, and that type of stuff. So that just kind of, you know, left that just kind of like flew out of her head. But at the same time, I don't blame her at all, because access to mental health services to ethnic minority groups in Ireland is just not reaching them. The conversation is getting better, and the awareness is getting better in Ireland, but it's just not reaching the communities, and it's just not representing the communities that we have in Ireland today. Even when I was in secondary school, we would have you know, mental health awareness week, and we would have like guest speakers come in and that type of stuff, but I felt that I couldn't reach out, because, you know, 13-year-old me was kind of like, you know, there's no one else that looks like me, so maybe it's just me that's, you know, just struggling with my mental health. Like, maybe I'm just overreacting and that type of stuff. But now I know that it's not true, that it's okay not to be okay, and it's okay to reach out for help. So I basically had to wait until I turned 18 to be independent and take things into my own hands. And, you know, my first point of reaching out for help was with Pieta House. I was actually with them for 9 months. And then afterwards, everything just came afterwards. And I'm now more educated in services and that type of stuff. But I think the message that I want to leave is that mental health doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter what your gender is, your sexual orientation is, if you're Black, if you're white, mental health doesn't discriminate. Anyone can struggle with their mental health. And a lot of the things that I've heard that came back to me is that, like, you know, mental health issues is like a white man's issue. It's not, you know, anyone can struggle with their mental health. But just with the cultural stigma that comes with it would be, you know, a lot of communities would have very strong religious beliefs ingrained in their culture and, you know, in their society and families. So, like, for example, Nigeria would be kind of mainly a Christian/Muslim country. So, like, my family is Christian. I'm a Christian myself. So growing up, I was used to hearing things like, you know, I wasn't praying enough, I wasn't going to church enough, I must have done something for me to be struggling this way, and that type of stuff. And now I know that it's like, you know, you can be a Muslim, you can be a Christian, you can be spiritual, and you can be any religion, and, you know, at the end of the day, we're just human. That there's no shame in struggling with your mental health, and there's no shame in speaking about it, because intervention is better than prevention, and then prevention is better than solution, you know. And if you just act in the early stages, it kind of prevents the domino effect of other things that go down the line. And you know, just especially as ethnic minorities, a lot of the specific struggles that we would go through would be, the top would be racism, and then afterwards would be, you know, access to employment, access to education, discrimination when it comes to receiving healthcare or housing, jobs, that type of stuff. But yeah, so I think going forward, what I would like to see in Ireland is, I guess, just more representation, to represent the image of the Ireland that we have today. And I think that goes with, like, you know, trying to improve information and research with organizations such as Carja. I don't know if you guys have heard of Carja. They are a community development organization, and they aim to tackle inequalities with health in ethnic minority communities. I don't know, I think they're based in Balbriggan. They're somewhere in Dublin. But especially in mental health, they would be dealing with tackling issues in that area. And I only found out about them only last year. And, you know, that's an issue because, you know, I'm born and raised in Ireland, and I'm only finding out about that organization, you know, 20 years later, you know. And my mom has never heard of it. And, you know, I will continue to have this conversation with her. But there was a report, I think they did in 2008 with DCU, new communities and mental health, and they did research on how people of ethnic minority backgrounds feel about reaching out for support in their mental health, and what they think of it. And it was just basically like a massive no, that they wouldn't reach out. So that's what Karja is there to break down the cultural barriers in that area. And then also recently, Black Therapist Ireland, they're on Instagram. They are very informative. They set up their page in October this year. And their page is very informative because, you know, me accessing, with my experience and with access to mental health services, for me, I didn't mind what therapist I got as long as they were able to just help me get through my issues. But I know people would be more comfortable with other people that looked like them. So Black Therapist Ireland on Facebook and Instagram, they have therapists of ethnic minority backgrounds, and there's always new ones coming up each week on their page. I think a lot of them are private, but going forward, I would hope that, you know, sometime in the future we would have ethnic minority counselling services in public healthcare services. But that's just a page to look out for.
Yeah, it would be,
yeah,
it will be like actually now there are a lot of like organizations and charities that you can go to look for help. So thank you, Blessing, for sharing. And so if you have like some mental health issues, it is not a shame to talk about it, to be open to it, and to ask for some help. Yeah, and it is getting better, much better now. So it will be, and it will be much better in the future. And you can get help, and you can deal with it.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And thank you, Blessing. So next, let's welcome Miss Anna Brosie. She is a well-being coach, helping people to foster well-being, resilience, and performance. She's also proficient in mental health first aid. So I think, yeah, she will give us some mental health improvement advice. And thank you, and let's welcome Anna now.
Hi, thank you. My name is Marie Brosi, and as Lynn said, I work in the area of mental health as well as being a primary school teacher. So I've been teaching for the last, oh gosh, nearly 20 years at this stage, and I'm nearly finished my master's in positive psychology and coaching psychology. So I have been coaching as well. And actually before I did my teaching, I did psychotherapy as well. And this is where I suppose my fascination with mental health would come from, is it's our mind, how we think and how we feel about our life, and how we react to things in our lives, if you like, and I suppose the impact of your mind on your life. So I want to just touch on something that Blessing said there as well. It's about the fact that we all have physical health, and thankfully in this day and age, globally, every man, woman and child, there's UN charters, there's all of these amazing things in place, and we all know the relevance and importance of our physical health. And thankfully in Ireland, we've learned a lot in the last few years. We're coming around to understanding that not only have we physical health, but we also have mental health. And I totally understand, I'm just thinking of Ireland 20, 30 years ago. Mental health was not on the agenda. There was such a stigma, surrounding anything got to do with mental health, how you thought, how you felt, anything. And there was zero resources. I'm just thinking, as myself as a child, or for anybody that I knew, and even as a teacher for children, mental health 20 years ago just wasn't on the agenda. So I suppose an important thing to know is that, you know, mental health 100 years ago was on the agenda. It's going to be on the agenda in the next 100 years. It's always been there. It's not a new thing. And no matter what part of the planet you live on, your mental health is just as important as your physical health. And it is regardless of gender or color or ethnic group or anything. Every human being has mental health, and every human being has physical health. So it needs just as much minding, if not more minding and nurturing than your physical health. Because if you are mentally not feeling well, then regardless of physical health, regardless of, you know, how much money you have, what job you have, what circumstances you're living in, you are not going to be happy, because you're mentally just not able to, I suppose, embrace that, if you like. So my message here this evening is to talk about this general idea of our mental health. And I think, you know, and I'm picking up on what both girls were referring to, you know, the women, you know, I think historically probably second-class citizens and all that, but I suppose, and women, we are more in tune with our own mental health. We are more intuitive by nature. We are more, you know, we have just a different kind of physiology as well as psychology than our male counterparts. So we need to, I suppose, even more so mind our mental health, because it is such an important part of our psyche, and obviously for men as well. But, you know, particularly for women, we really need to nurture our mental health. So I'm thinking, and again, going back to the two girls, their stories, the resilience that I picked up on in both Clara's story and in Blessing's story was so relevant. And they don't even know how resilient they are, or they don't even know what they've come through. You know, I'm sure they know what they've come through, but they don't even know their own strengths. So, and we talk a lot about reaching outwards. Sometimes there's no place, and there hasn't been in the past, some place to reach out to, because the support and help hasn't actually been there. And the support and help has not been, if you like, what we require internally. So I suppose my job as a mental health advocate and a mental health, you know, person that works with people's well-being, particularly their emotional well-being, is that sometimes the best place, and I would have learned this from my own experience, is that you actually reach inwards and you actually start to look at your own strengths, and you start to name them, and you start to use them, and you start to understand and look at what is getting me through this rough time. And I suppose that's another thing. Sometimes we compare ourselves to everybody else, and we think that they're having a great life, my life is awful, or they look like this, they're great, and I look awful, or all these negative, we constantly compare ourselves to each other. But the point is, although everybody has mental health, everybody has issues in their life, and everybody will have issues at different stages of their life. So it's all about building up those strengths and building up one's resilience to deal appropriately with these issues. So any person, you know, we will all lose people that we love. We will all get sick at some point. We will all know people that get sick. We will all suffer in one way or the other, and nobody on the planet will escape that. So I think particularly now, you know, teachers, educators, policymakers are beginning to become aware of that. And you see a lot of emphasis on this in schools. The 10-year-olds in our school, they're able to name their feelings. They're able to, you know, it's such a different place than when I was a kid, for example. You know, none of us knew how we were feeling, and none of us were able to express it. And, you know, there was no psychological safe spaces, if you like. Thankfully, the landscape is changing dramatically all the time, and it continues to do that. And I suppose what's really important is, Emmy that's watching this, first of all, everybody has mental health. It is going to be good some days, and other days it is going to be not so good. And when you hit a crisis in your life, as you will, as we all will, it's going to be tested. And this is where, you know, your best friend is going to have to be yourself. And the person that's going to get you through this is yourself. And yes, whilst we do need to reach out to our supports, the only person that's going to get you up in the morning and get you through that day is yourself. So I suppose one simple practice that I would suggest to people is just to simply, in the middle of all the busyness and all the chaos and all the everything, just check in with yourself and just kind of ask yourself, okay, how am I feeling right now? And just literally, just that bringing yourself back to, not to earth, if you like, but, you know, grounding yourself in yourself for a split second, you realize that your head is someplace else, or, you know, you're thinking or worrying, or, you know, maybe thinking something that happened last year, or something that's going to happen next month or next year, or has never happened. So it's all about bringing your thoughts, bringing yourself just back to yourself for a split second, or for just for a minute, and just grounding yourself. And if you were to do that, you know, a few times every day, this would really, you know, you would really become aware, because you're trying to grow your self-awareness all the time as well, that you actually spend so much time not in your body, not being present, and focused on other stuff. So the whole thing, and I only learned this in my 20s, I used to believe that all my thoughts were facts. I used to believe that everything I thought was true. And of course, what happens then is I start to fuel and to nurture all the negative thoughts. And before I knew it, I was spiraling, you know, and I could be, oh, it was just mad actually when I think about it. I could spiral. Now, thankfully, I was able to catch myself, but I could really go down all these different rabbit holes, and we're all guilty of doing this. But I never knew that actually I had control over my thoughts. I never knew that I could stop my negative thinking. I never knew that I was in charge of me and not my thoughts. I thought they were in charge of me. And of course, your thoughts determine your feelings as well. So it took a huge amount of work, but actually by becoming master of your own thoughts instead of your thoughts running the show is a huge exercise and a huge important practice for your positive mental health. So that's probably the second thing. So, you know, grounding yourself in the present, and just no matter what you're doing, you know, if you're having a crazy day at work, or, you know, in the kitchen with the kids or whatever, just literally taking a minute, you know, how am I feeling right now? Where is my head? And, you know, where do I need to be? And just giving yourself 30 seconds to do that as often as you think about it. And then the second thing then is, what did I say it was? It was about, yeah, just becoming aware of your thoughts, and again, bring it back to yourself. And why am I thinking of what that conversation I had with that person 6 weeks ago? And why is that still annoying me? Let that go, you know, and just literally you're working with yourself non-judgmentally and with kindness as well. You know, we have an awful habit of being our own worst critics. So it's kind of like the whole point of this conversation is that you actually start to become your own best friend, because no matter where you go on the planet, that is the person you're going to be bringing with you. So you need to be very much in tune with that part of yourself. So the next thing then is kind of like, as I said, we're all going to have issues. We're all going to have things happen to us. It's kind of like, what gets me through this? Like for myself, for example, I'm a real fixer by nature. So I like to solve problems. And, you know, people say to me, you're always wanting to fix things, blah, blah, blah. But the thing is, that's how I do it for myself. So I have learned there's a downside to that as well. I can't fix anybody else, but I can fix for myself. So it's again knowing what's in your control and what's not in your control. So I'm conscious now, I'm getting over time here, so I'm just going to come back to that. It's just that perspective of being resilient. So rather than reaching outwards all the time, I think, you know, one thing I'm trying to get across here this evening is that actually to start to reach inwards and to start to name and acknowledge your strengths. And instead of looking at what's wrong and how bad everything is, it's kind of like there's so many strengths that you use on a daily basis, and so much resilience, and you don't even know it. So it's just that part, to acknowledge them and start building on them. And yeah. That's it then. So
great, thank you so much. So it's like we've got some hope from Anna, because we know like some professional teacher like Anna is like nurturing the next generation to lead them to have awareness of their mental health. And so the future is promising. The landscape is changing in a positive way. Thank you, Anna. And next, we're gonna welcome Senator Joan Freeman. Yeah, she is the founder of Pieta House and Darkness into Light. She is also mental health consultant, author, and 2018 presidential candidate. Welcome, Joan Freeman. So She's gonna share something about her knowledge and some activities in her previous experience to help people to improve their mental health. So let's welcome Senator Joan Freeman.
Hi, what's very, very funny here is I was the one at the very beginning saying, oh, I can't talk for 10 minutes. I'm sure none of us can talk for 10 minutes to a screen. And here you all are, magnificent and talking away. So just a couple of things, really. The first thing is I'm at least 100 years older than Clara and Blessing. That's the first thing. Probably almost 100 years older than everybody else here as well. But I suppose the most important thing is that, and I'm presuming some of this, that we are where we are today because of our own personal experience. And that makes us experts. So even though I'm 100 years older than all of you, you are the expert in your area. You, Clara, in the eating area, and of course, Blessing in the minority ethnic, and the fact that your conversation was very interesting over the fact that you went to your mum and how she wasn't able really to respond. But you know what, Ireland is still very much like that. I mean, I'm sure Barbara will go on about stigma afterwards, but you know, if you think about the people from the traveling community, for example, I would have a very, I'd be very passionate about helping people from the traveling community, simply because the 90% of men, for example, don't reach the age of 60. Suicide is 6 times the rate, you know, in normal society, in other levels of society. And even though they would have known about Pieta House and a lot of other services, they will not go near it. And that is because of stigma. They are so ashamed. So your mum was no different to all of us. I remember when about a year after Pieta House was open, we were open next to a little convent. And one day this nun, the head nun, came in and she had this huge statue. And she wanted to know, did we want it? And I said no. But she went on to tell me that 40 years prior to that, her brother died by drowning. And she knows for a fact that he took his own life. But it was never, ever spoken about. It was treated as an accident. We are very slow at lifting stigma. And while we have organizations like the HSE saying, advertising, let someone know, if we let someone know, there should be services to meet that need. And to be honest, again, so I'm going to be negative out of the whole lot of you here tonight, because as far as I'm concerned, our services are absolutely rubbish. We spend the most in Europe. I think we spend the most on mental health services than any other country in Europe, yet it's not getting down to the front line. And so any difficulties that people have from the Black and Asian and ethnic minority groups, you are experiencing the same as everybody else. The only difference is we do not have the cultural confidence that we should have. We do not have the ability to have perfect communication and interpretation. We don't have those. But as far as accessing mental health services, we are pretty rubbish. And whether they're free or not, it doesn't matter. The reality is we are a tiny country. We should be able to provide everybody with the most perfect service. So my bit of tuppence halfpenny worth of advice to you, especially to all of you who are so passionate about what you're talking about here tonight, is go and do something. Don't wait for someone else to go and do it. Clara, with your eating disorder experience, there's nobody who's got the best experience other than you. The same with you, Blessing. The same with you, Anna. You know, you've developed yourself, and I know Barbara from over the last couple of years. She is 3/4 younger than me, by the way, just in case. So let's be clear of that as well. To me, just getting mental health and getting over things and trying to get better, and you do need services. You do need that support for sure. And while everybody's experience is unique, The services we need is to be one of a hopeful attitude. Everybody can get better with the right support, with the right mental health attitude, and with love, to be perfectly honest. I'm sorry about that's going to keep banging away now until 8 o'clock. So I really, do you know what? I'm better off if somebody asks me questions rather than me telling you stuff, because I don't know anymore. You're all, you know, far more knowledgeable now than I am, because you're right up to date with everything. I'm working in an organisation temporarily at the moment and talking about stigma. So it's for people who've been sexually abused. And that is still so massively huge, the stigma around that. But also there's been a lot of people who are from the deaf community. And it's only lately that we're giving people who have hearing difficulties interpreters. So how did we cope before that, you know? So there's so much more to do. At least you have the energy and the youthfulness and everything else to go and start making a difference. And that's exactly what I would say to you. Go and make a difference. Start doing something yourself.
Yeah.
And my brother-in-law has just walked in while I'm right in the middle of a Zoom call.
No problem. So you are the founder of Darkness to Light. So the name is like, it could like help people to step out of the darkness to look for light. So what's the motive of this motive to create such organization?
So, you know, to be perfectly honest, when Pieta House started, it was started again, like I said to all of you, you've all coming from a personal place. So did I. You know, I used to have my own private practice. And if anybody came to me who had suicidal thoughts or behaviors, I would actually run them off. Sorry, just hold on for a second. That's going to be so loud in here. So I ran them off to their GP, etc., etc. So then when it came to my own home door, I could see things from a different perspective. And really, I could see for the very first time that the majority of people who have suicidal ideation don't necessarily suffer from long-term mental health issues. They are usually, for many of them, many people, they're reacting to a life event. So that was the whole purpose of the targeting Pieta onto people who just may be going through a difficult time in their life and they're not coping. I mean, if you think of the economic crisis, again, you're probably all too young for this, but 2007, 2008, when the country just slammed into economic crisis, the most affected people were the farmers and people in building in the construction industry. And suicide was rampant during that time. So people were, and as I said, the theoretical part was that they were reacting to a life event. But Darkness into Light was basically actually two things. One, a fundraising event, you know, because when I started Pieta House, it was not one penny coming from the government for years. So I had to get money somehow. But the second thing was giving people permission to grieve and to do it openly and publicly and together. And Darkness into Light now has become such an incredible event, and that if you see someone that you never met before at a Darkness into Light event, you know that they're grieving. And you know that not only are they grieving, but that they're allowed to grieve with you. So it has turned from a fundraising event to something of terrific recognition. So it's 15 years old, is it? No, it's not. It's about 12 years old. But it was something like last year, 2019, 220,000 people around the world walked at that time of the day.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you so much, Joe Freeman. Thanks so much for doing so much for mental health, to support people, to offer a place for them to deal with their mental health issues. And I believe that more and more people will pay attention to this issue. And your organization and the mental health issue people, they will get more support. Thank you so much. And then let's welcome Miss Barbara Brennan. She is the National Stigma Reduction Program Coordinator. She's also speaker, facilitator, and coach. Moreover, she is an expert on mental health and well-being. So she will talk more about the stigma reduction. And let's welcome Barbara.
Thank you so much. And I'm actually glad that I got to speak after everybody else, because it's been such a pleasure to hear what everybody has to say, but it also makes my job easier to kind of speak about the things that we have heard about here. So as Joan said, we all come from a place of passion. And I feel like when we have any kind of conversations with people who work in the area of mental health, it certainly seems to be that way. And certainly for me, that's my story. I'm a suicide survivor, and 12 years ago, I was on life support. I got here to work in mental health because I didn't want anybody else to go through what I went through. We've heard the word stigma from each of our speakers today. So what I'd really like to do, instead of talking about my personal story and my passion, or talking about the tips and tools around mental health, I'd like to talk a little bit about what stigma is, so that we can understand that piece and how that barrier is in place, and particularly when we're talking about the BAME communities. And even, you know, if we just look at women from a point of view of the carer, you know, how can I support myself when I'm also caring for my family or my partner, or those different pieces? So when we talk about stigma, what is that? And also, even when we talk about mental health, what is that? And I know Blessing and Anna have both spoken about the fact that we all have mental health and we all have physical health. But the idea of really digging in and understanding what mental health is and what those challenges are. So the idea is, if we've ever had sadness, if we've ever had happiness, if we've ever had worry, if we've ever had stress, if we've ever had exhaustion, if we've ever had fear or anger, or just absolute joy, that's our mental health. And it's how we respond to those feelings and how we respond to those parts. That's our mental health. And when we start seeing mental health struggles and that piece around the struggle, particularly not just the diagnosis and not just the illness, but the struggle of it, that's when we start understanding when things don't work, or when things are stuck in the negative side and the feelings that are more difficult. And quite often when we think about our negative feelings and behaviours, sometimes we don't want those or we don't like them, but every emotion has a purpose and no emotion is a bad one. It's what we do with it and how we respond to it. So understanding mental health in that way, that we all have it, but what does that mean? So how does it affect my behaviour? What is my mood? What is how I feel, and how does that work? And then when we start understanding it in that way, it's a little bit more accessible. So, you know, when we're talking about accessibility, even the understanding of what we're talking about and how we feel and how we respond to it is really important to understand. But if we don't understand the topic in the first place, how could I possibly begin to start trying to find information on this thing that I don't even understand? So understanding what it is we're talking about is imperative in the first place. And then we can start finding out some of the places that we might go. And like that, you know, I think, Joan, you said it so perfectly, don't wait. This idea that I have to wait for somebody else, because here's the thing, my first suicide attempt was when I was 14 and I was 28 when I was put on life support machine. So it took me 14 years of struggle. And it was only in the last 12 years that I started doing it for myself and seeking out that information. And when I didn't get the information I needed from one place, I would go again and go somewhere else. And I would start asking people, what works for you? Or what, you know, if it doesn't work, why didn't it work? And sometimes the idea of having to do all of that can be overwhelming. So it's about choosing a small part and taking that piece. But really, I would like to focus on the idea of what stigma is, because it's only when I look back in my life that I understand the impact and the power that it had, and the hold that it had on me, and the barrier that it placed. And particularly when we're talking about BAME communities, there's an additional barrier and an additional stigma. Blessing spoke about it very well when she was speaking about the additional layers of being Black and being a female, and, you know, like being in a country where the voices aren't represented. That's a barrier in itself. So when we start looking at what stigma is, it's stereotyping, it's prejudice, it's discrimination. When we put those words on it, now we can start understanding actually what it is, what it might feel like. So what does it feel like to be excluded? What does it feel like to be treated differently? What does it feel like to be ignored? Now we can start really understanding what stigma is. And when we start looking at how stigma appears, we also have two ways of looking at it. We've got public stigma. So this is the idea that stigma is being put on you by the social exclusion, or by people's perceptions of you, or by their behavior to you. But then we have the self-stigma. So this is now what I do to myself. So how I treat myself based on my perception. So for example, if I perceive that I'm going to be treated differently or less well than, I'm going to be discriminated against, or people are going to treat me with prejudice, so they're going to be negative towards me, maybe I will choose to isolate myself. Maybe I will choose to stay away from social gatherings, or I will not go down to the shop because I don't want to have that treatment. But now in doing that action, there are going to be negative repercussions because of that. So this is where understanding those pieces, that will help us to start understanding where the barrier is, rather than the huge size of this thing, this word stigma. It's only when we start breaking it down and identifying what it is that we can start looking at how we can address it. So we've spoken a little bit around what the stigma is, but how it looks and how it feels is really about the language that we use. And I think certainly when we're talking about different communities and different ethnicities, we've got those additional barriers of language, of culture, of misunderstanding, and there's so many different layers there. So it's about how do we address those pieces to say, where do I fit in this? What do I believe? If I'm in a community that doesn't believe in mental health, or if I'm in a community that doesn't understand stigma, but I'm experiencing it, how do I break that barrier? Because that's now an additional barrier to me seeking support and help. So it really is around, what do I think about this? Have I ever thought about it before? What do I know about it? And again, you know, as I think Anna, you were saying about what you thought, and you thought that your thoughts were facts. So the idea that what we've been brought up with, our beliefs and our thoughts, that doesn't make it a fact specifically. So it's about, how do I educate myself a little bit more? Or maybe, how do I educate the people around me? How do I help them to understand this topic? And so from a point of view of the work that I do, I'm so grateful to work with an organisation that I get to talk about this topic. And we get to have people like Blessing as our ambassadors to tell their stories and share their life with people, to say this happens to everybody. Because, and Blessing, you said it perfectly, mental health doesn't discriminate, and neither does stigma, because stigma happens to everybody. And I do think that the BAME communities have that additional stigma because of those cultural differences, because of those extra pieces. And then if we add being a woman, the extra layers that are there. And I know that we, you know, certainly in Ireland, I feel blessed that I am allowed to have a voice. I am allowed to have an opinion. I'm allowed to use it. I am respected in my role. You know, I have equal opportunities. I am very privileged. There are a lot of people who haven't got that. So it's about looking at, where do we fit and how do we address those things, and who do we seek out to support ourselves in our journeys to get to a different place. So I suppose I'd like to, I'm very conscious of your time, so I'd like to really finish with, the seeking support piece is the biggest part. If you don't know where to get information, today is the day to find out. And I think some of the things that we really need to do is start looking at, how do we share information differently. So I know that there has been a number of different organisations mentioned on this video, and I think it's really important that you go and look and see, is that organisation something that would be of interest to me or of support? If I don't know where to get information, do I need to go to Citizens Information and ask them? Do I need to ring Samaritans to unload my burden until I can find something? You know, is it that I need to look for a specific counselling service? So I know, for example, Insight Matters do a lot of work with ethnic minorities and with the LGBTQ plus communities. So it's about, how do I find what fits me? And if I can't find it, don't stop, because that's one of the things that I gave up on. I would look and I would get overwhelmed and I would get exhausted, and I would say, there's nobody out there like me, I'm on my own. You are not on your own. There are so many people having these same experiences. You just haven't found your tribe yet in this particular journey. So it's about connecting with more people and reaching out and asking. So if you haven't found the right service, you need to do a little bit more research and ask, and don't be afraid to check in with people who are in organizations, even to say, look, I know you're not the right organization for me, but would you know where else I can go? So don't close the door. And if a door is closed, you need to find the window and get in that way. So it's about not giving up. It's about giving yourself the time and giving yourself the chance. But also, I think one of the most beautiful things that you said, Joan, was that everybody is their own expert. You know yourself better than anybody else can or will. And also, you are the only person who is going to spend your entire life with you, 24 hours a day for the rest of your life. You have to be your biggest cheerleader. So if you want to find out more about what we do from a language perspective, from a point of view of disrupting communities and trying to change this conversation, you can visit us at seechange.ie. I would also recommend, if you are struggling with your mental health at the moment, Clara mentioned the phone support. You can also find more information at the HSE and yourmentalhealth.ie. Today is a day of information. It's a day of sharing. If you don't know the answers, please go and find out. So thank you so much for your time and for including me. I'm delighted to be part of it, and it was great to listen to everybody earlier. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Barbara. Now we have a better understanding of what stigma is, and we have a general idea about how to deal with that. So the people who suffer from mental health, they're never alone. They can always get help and some professional advice. Thank you, Barbara. So next section. Do you all have like questions about each other? About each other's like story, experience, and what we have been talked about?
Can I just say something? I'm really sorry. I have to join another webinar at 8 o'clock. And it's completely different to this one. So I'll be able to hold on for another 10 minutes, but I'm going to have to go after that, if that's okay. I'm really sorry.
No problem with that. So Joan, do you have, like, after all this sharing, do you have anything to comment on, or do you want to say something?
I think you're all brilliant. I think, Barbara, I could listen to you all night. You just have so much knowledge, and you can deliver it all so well. You all can. But sometimes we need to hear very clearly something that Barbara said, what is stigma? A very simple question, but in fact it was extraordinary. It's an extraordinary question. So if we could all even think of things like that, just come up with the basic question and then expand on it. And you are all expert speakers in your own right. But I think I just want to say, because I know Barbara a little while as well, that you actually taught me something tonight. And so you all did, honestly, you all did. I shouldn't just pick on one person, I'm so sorry.
Well, thank you. And you know, it's funny because for me, I only started exploring what I thought about stigma after I started working with Sea Change. So I'm working with Sea Change 10 years now. I was a volunteer, then I was facilitator, and now I run the program. But it was only after my first 2 years of working as an ambassador that I started exploring what does that mean? But also the more difficult part of that is, how might I be prejudiced against other people? So what are the things that I think about or don't think about? And that's the bit that I've pre-decided something. So even when we talk about the language behind stigma, that prejudice, what does that mean? I've pre-decided this negative thing about you. I put this label on you. So for me, looking at my own judgments and looking at the feelings that I have and the thoughts that I have around these things, where did they come from? Why do I think that? I am a nice person. I'm a kind person. I love people. So where did these negative things come from? Came from fear. And it only is through education that I started understanding that, and I started learning about how we can do it. And I think that's the bit for all of us. And I've certainly learned so much from each of you in the different ways that we can approach this. But the most important thing for me is that we're all in this together. And I feel like that's kind of the theme of this year, in it together. But really and truly, from a mental health perspective, we really are. Because it's like your mental health is a bit like your fingerprint. We all have one, but they are unique. And I think that's the most incredible part of this, that we have this unique thing that is ours and ours alone. So for me, I would love to know, actually, before you go down, in your experience, because you have so much of it, and your hope for, if we were to change something, what might that look like? If, you know, like for example, we would be stigma free, or we would be in a society that was a little bit different. Maybe what's one action other than the asking for support? What's the one action that we could get to, I suppose?
Great. Thank you, Joan. Thank you, Barbara. That's wonderful. And do others have any questions? Like Anna, but I think Clara, do you have any questions or comments about what we have talked about?
I think just well done to everyone. It's really just been so insightful and powerful listening to everyone and all your own individual journeys. If there was one word that I would use for this call or to take away from it, I think it would definitely be inspiration, because we all have our own individual experiences and have overcome so much in different ways. And I really think that this is going to be so helpful, not only for people who may be possibly struggling with their mental health, but also for healthcare professionals and mental health care professionals, you know, to really get an insight and understanding.
Okay, thank you so much, Clara.
Yeah, for me, I would just like to echo on that. Like, the word I would give for this call would be powerful, because, you know, representation is powerful, inclusion is powerful. When all our voices joins together to bring about change in Ireland together is powerful. And, you know, just after listening to Barbara, like, she summarized basically, I get really anxious easily, but she summarized things I want to say better, and I'm so glad for that, because, you know, at the end of the day, I really want to see representation in the mental health conversation, but I know that, you know, I can't do it alone. So it's just great to see that support, and, you know, I'm just so blessed to be a Sea Change ambassador, just to give me the opportunities and the platforms to try and reach out to other people, you know. And just especially that, you know, it's a coincidence that the National Women's Council, they launched their Not in Your Head campaign this week, just to raise awareness about, you know, women's mental health in Ireland, and, you know, especially all the things that have happened to women this year. I've actually written down a list, like, you know, COVID-19 and pregnancy this year, the sexual image scandals, domestic violence, and the program that I think the Gardaí enrolled this year, I think it's called Operation Fuishiv. I might pronounce that wrong. But, you know, just, we go through so much, but, you know, we together, we just need to hold each other up and, you know, get through this together, you know, and, you know, there's no shame in that. So yeah.
Thank you, Blessing. And let's go look at the questions from audience. There's one question about Anna. So it's about how can we help each other as two friends if we both have mental problems?
How can we help each other if we have, sorry, just repeat that. If we both have mental health problems, is it?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
How can we help each other if like we both have mental problems?
Well, okay, fair. And it's going back to that thing I was saying earlier, like everybody on the planet has got mental health, and then, you know, how we react to things, and, you know, what creates, I suppose, or say how we respond to situations in our life, then kind of our mental health can suffer a little bit, or, you know, we need to kind of open up our inner resiliences and our resources and skills to kind of get through that. So how we could help each other, is, I suppose, again, and it's about what the girls were saying, you know, to get access to supports that, you know, that we need, whether that's through our trusted relationships or in the community or whatever, but also to support each other by being, you know, listening to each other, by being able to be present whilst listening to each other without taking on the other person's stuff as well. So there's actually a lot we can do, because I'm just thinking of in COVID-19, there would have been families under lots of pressure, you know, from being together 24/7 and, you know, lost jobs and all of that. So definitely would have, you know, mental health would have definitely suffered in a lot of houses around the country. So it's going back to reaching out where necessary, but also, you know, listening, supporting each other, and just listening without judgment, listening kind of, you know, because when you're suffering from, you know, mental health issues as well, or if your mental health is kind of, you know, you feel very vulnerable. And I think it was Barbara saying it earlier, and it's part of what happens humans when we face adversity or challenge. We want to isolate ourselves. It is not intuitive to reach out and say, hey, I'm going to start talking to everybody now about my problems. We actually do the opposite. We kind of retreat and we go back into ourselves. But what happens then is sometimes by going back into ourselves, we start judging ourselves, we become critical of ourselves, and we actually become very nasty to ourselves. So at least if you have somebody in you know, friends or in the house or something, that where one person is going through that, you're in an amazing position where you can offer support and help and kindness to this other person, regardless of if you're all, you know, doesn't, you know, there's loads of people in any house going through mental health issues. So it's just simply offering a listening ear, being kind, and just offering support. And it's just what you're trying to do for each other is not feel so vulnerable, not feel so isolated. And you're just trying to support that person in their moment to moment or in their day to day. And at the same time, and you will know this yourselves as well, if you need access to, you know, getting, you know, help. I suppose I'm just thinking of myself. I live in the countryside here. You get to your GP, you go on the internet, somebody says citizens advice as well. So just accessing this for your friend or vice versa. And, you know, you're not on your own. There are, you know, yourself and your friend in this together. So that is brilliant. That is a bonus. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Anna. And there's another question for Barbara about what can we do individually to break to public stigma around us?
There's a couple of things. I think firstly, starting small. So the idea that I want to influence change from a social perspective, we don't have access to the entire world, but we have access to our world. So it's about having conversations with the people in my environment. So can I have conversations in my workplace? Can I look at what's available from a point of view of training or seminars or getting involved with different events? Like, for example, we run a Green Ribbon campaign every year. So, you know, am I the person who's going to suggest that to my workplace? If it's conversations with my family, is there a way for me to bring my family into this conversation and say, have you heard about stigma? Do you know what that is? Or what kind of language do you think, you know, what do you think of mental health? What do you think that is? Or, you know, like there are ways that we can have these conversations. And then sometimes it might be even to go and find a way of saying, well, actually, you know, like I was on this seminar, I was on this call, and I heard this and this and this, and this is information that was shared, and isn't that interesting? And what do you think of that? So it's a way of bringing the conversation in without being defensive, without being aggressive, without being judgmental, because it's one of the things when we're looking at culture change. We were talking about prejudice and discrimination earlier. Sometimes if we reverse it, and this idea that I don't want to stigmatize anybody else and I don't want to judge anybody else, but sometimes when we see that somebody isn't at the same level of us, it's nearly like we're judging them because they're not there too. So it's really important that if we're trying to help guide somebody in culture change and in breaking stigma, that we don't judge them for not being where we are. So it's an idea of how do we kindly have this conversation and allow them come at their own rate? How do we help them change language? And one of the really easy ways through conversation is, for example, when I hear somebody say specifically commit suicide, We don't use the word commit anymore, and we see it as stigmatizing language. And one of the things that I would say is, that's really interesting that you said the word commit. Do you know why we don't say it anymore? Are you aware that we don't say it anymore? Are you aware of where it came from? So it was originally because it was against the church. It was a sin against God, and it was a sin, or it was against the law. Both of those things have been removed, so we shouldn't be using the word commit anymore. But in doing that, what language are we replacing it with? So now we have to say, died by suicide, ended their life, took their life, killed themselves. You know, there's lots of different ways to say it, but it becomes more difficult because now it's more personal and it's more real. But that's how we're going to start changing these conversations. And then it's about, how do you feel about that language? That was a really difficult conversation, wasn't it? So now we're talking about how I feel in this conversation, in this piece. So it's about thinking about, what do I think about this? What is the best approach for me to have this conversation? What is the platform I'm going to use? Where am I going to do it? Is now the appropriate time? So I might be passionate about wanting to make change and really want to do this, but maybe my environment is not right. Maybe the person I want to do this with isn't in the right headspace, or maybe it's the totally wrong time. Like if I go to have this conversation about changing the word commit with my friend who has a newborn baby, and the baby is absolutely having a fit because she's starving, and you know, mama's trying to do 16 different things, that's not the right time to have that discussion. So it's about being timely, it's about being appropriate, it's about knowing your boundaries, and it's about knowing that, you know, we shouldn't be judging other people for their attitudes and their opinions, and they're entitled to their own opinions as well. So there's a number of different things, and it's quite complex, but it's about starting from a place of kindness, really.
Okay, thank you so much, Barbara. And then we have another question to Clara. How does society view mental and physical health differently? And do you think the two should be addressed in the same manner? Why or why not?
Yeah, I think like definitely echoing what Barbara said, it needs to come from more so a place of education. Absolutely, like our physical and mental health are connected, and they both need to be viewed with the same importance and the same equality. But you know, it is kind of still more acceptable to say like, oh, I'm just tired, or oh no, I'm, you know, like I have a cold, or my stomach is sore, rather than like, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling down, I don't feel like myself. And I suppose just coming from a place of education, in that, you know, we have a physical health and we have mental health, and they are both really important. And like, we know ourselves as well that, you know, when your physical health isn't great, it can impact on your mental health, and vice versa. When your mental health isn't great, that can also impact on your physical health. And explaining these links, I think really helps. Like, you know, when you have a flu and you're really run down and your body is aching, but you also might feel a little bit crappy in yourself too, and your self-esteem might be down and your motivation might be down, because they're linked. And the same way with someone who maybe, say, is suffering from depression, might find that, you know, they're getting headaches, they're feeling tired, they might also be having aches and pains in their body, because they're linked. And just coming from that place of education and explaining it in a helpful way, and just looking at it. I hope that's helpful. Sorry.
Yeah, that's going to be helpful. Yeah, thank you so much, Clara. And so yeah, time flies. We have run about 1.5 hours, so we are going to the end of this panel. So at the end of this panel, like, we invite like every one of you to share one sentence comment, yeah, to the audience. And first goes the Blessing.
I'm just going to echo on like what Barbara was saying, that like, you know, it's awesome that we're having this conversation online, but directing people to resources and, you know, helplines is really important in actually putting actions behind our words. So I've, like, if anyone follows me on social media, or even the National Women's Council. They have a huge range of resources and information in their bio, and so does See Change. And, you know, it ranges from, you know, different counselling services to cater to any issue that you're going through. And just to know that, you know, people are becoming more open and more willing to give an ear to listen, and you know, there's compassion and love, and that, you know, you don't have to go through this alone. So just, you know, to reach out and to be there for each other.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Blessing. And how about Anna? Like to one sentence to.
Oh, one. Okay. Yeah, just I suppose echo what Blessing said there as well. Okay, so I suppose in a nutshell, we are. Oh gosh, sorry, I forget what I was going to say, but we all have strengths, as well as, you know, we all have good days and bad days, and just to build on your strengths, you kind of start to become your own best friend, because you live with yourself and your mental health and, you know, yourself for your whole lifetime. So you need to become your own best friend, and in times of struggle, always reach out and get the support, but also, you know, go inward as well and become your friend, not your enemy. That's my big long sentence. And thank you to everybody. I really enjoyed listening to this tonight, everybody. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Anna. And Barbara?
For me, it's a reminder that you're more than the sum of your mental health experience. So if you are struggling at the moment, and if you are having a negative mental health experience, you're more than that. So one of the things that I remind myself is that I'm a sister, I'm an aunt, I'm a friend, I'm a colleague, I'm an artist. There's lots of things that I am, but sometimes when we're struggling with our mental health, we focus on that too much and we forget about those things. So my message is that you are more than the sum of your experiences.
Yeah, thank you so much, Barbara. And Clara, do you have anything to share?
God, I think you've all just about covered it now, but absolutely, like, you need to be your own cheerleader. As cliche and cheesy as it is, you can't pour from an empty cup. You know, absolutely, you know, be there for your loved ones, but be there for yourself as well, and know that it's okay to not be okay. But you don't have to do that alone. You know, there's so many resources out there. There's been some fantastic organizations mentioned here tonight. God, See Change, Pieta House, National Women's Council, HSC.ie, Your Mental Health, and SpunOut. Some really great articles and information up there. And just know that whatever is going on right now is absolutely not permanent and will not last forever, I promise you. And just stay safe and take care of you. And thanks so much, everyone. It's really been fantastic getting to connect with all of you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Clara. And thank you all for your sharing. So if somebody have like mental health issue, they're not alone. They could be their own best friend, best expert. And it takes courage, strength, and resilience to overcome this kind of mental health issue. And we can see the courage, strength, and resilience from Blessing, from Clara. And we can also know that you're not alone. You could find some resources, help, support from, say, Barbara, from Anna, and from Joan. That's great. So thank you so much for joining us today. And don't forget to register to our channel. And there are gonna be more events to share about community sexuality issues. And thank you so much. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.